Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. BAM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update as we look out through the middle part of September. We'll have some key updates on precipitation trends, an up and down, probably volatile pattern as we go throughout the month of September, and what that will mean in terms of some increasing dryness in parts of the lower Ohio Valley through the Mississippi River Valley region. Talk about some potential implications with that as we go throughout this video. But I want to start out with the current radar and the transition that we're seeing right now to a cooler pattern. It's leading to much drier air across much of the country. We do have some rain and storms across parts of South Dakota this morning through the northern plains, some moisture along the Gulf Coast, but all things considered, this will be a theme as we work through the pattern ahead, with cooler and even more dry air filtering in as we work into this weekend and into early next week. Let's take a look at some of the temperatures as a result of this pattern change, guys. You can see still relatively mild as we work into tomorrow morning. Low temperatures in the 60s, certainly nothing compared to where we've been, with widespread 70s having been a theme throughout much of this summer. But you can see here, guys, as we go throughout the weekend, this is as we work into Sunday and into Monday. Take a look at this. Temperatures in the 50s down into the Central Plains, Ohio Valley, 40s across the northern plains, parts of Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, and this actually continues to trend cooler as we work into your Tuesday. In fact, a couple of record-breaking cold lows in here possible as we work into Tuesday morning across parts of the Central Plains as temperatures get down into the low to mid 50s and upper 40s. Could even see some 30s across northern parts of Minnesota and northern Wisconsin as we go into your Tuesday. And then as we go into Wednesday, parts of the western plains begin to warm up a little bit, but 40s down into parts of the Ohio Valley. Again, some record-breaking cool lows possible for parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and into Kentucky. So a much cooler pattern on the way here, and it will settle in as we go throughout next week. I do want to touch on the latest drought monitor update. For the most part throughout the summer, we really haven't had any kind of notable concerns, but I do want to note something that I'm keeping a close eye on as we head into fall. If we take a look here, we have seen some expansion of the drought conditions here across the Mississippi River region, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, parts of Kentucky, and down through Mississippi. This is important because we've dealt with issues in the past La Nina years that we've had with low river levels, making it difficult to maybe transport some product down the Mississippi River. If we take a look at the change over the past 4 weeks, we've seen pretty decent degradation across this region over the past 4 weeks. We have trended more and more into that drought category over the past month, which I do think is important because if we look at the last 5 La Nina years that we have had, there has certainly been a theme of dry conditions along the Mississippi River throughout the harvest season and the fall season in that region especially. And in general, these La Nina years over the past 10 years have favored a dry fall overall. I think that what we've seen over the past month of drying out in that region is probably the start of what will be our fall pattern. And so could we get into this fall and see low river levels and some issues there again? I don't think it's off the table given this signal and given the dryness that we've seen develop over the past month. That will need to be something that is watched carefully as we go over the next month or two, because if you look at our forecast right now, guys, you can see favoring drier conditions as a whole as we go throughout September. There will be some volatility. We'll get into that forecast here in a few minutes. But into October, guys, you can see it actually even turns a little bit drier there along the Gulf Coast and the lower Mississippi River Valley region. And so dry signals persist as we start out fall in that area. I would expect that drought conditions can continue to expand down there, and we could deal with some issues this fall of low river levels again. So I know that's been a topic the last several years with these La Ninas. I think it's something to monitor once again. In terms of the overall pattern the next couple of weeks, you can see here widespread cooler than normal temperatures the next 7 days. That lingers over into the week 2 time frame. We should start to warm things up late week 2 into the early part of September. Now, there are major differences in the model guidance right now in terms of temperatures as we go into early September. If we take a look here, you can see by the 11 to 15 day time frame, guys, we've got pretty decent differences between the EPS, the GEFS, and even some of the other data, the GEPS and the AIFS. There's really 4 different solutions that the data has right now. So lower the normal confidence. I do think based off of our top pattern drivers, our analogs, the GEFS in this case, it's done better with this colder shot of air. I think it's probably more correct. Could it be a little bit too far west? It's possible. But I think with time, this warmth will have the tendency to bleed east as we go late into the first week of September and into the second week of September. I am skeptical of this cooler air lingering around in a widespread fashion across the central and western U.S. of the EPS. Could we linger some cooler air down to the south and to the east? I think that's certainly plausible. But I think the GEFS is probably doing better with this pattern in terms of temperatures right now as a whole. I would disagree in terms of precipitation. We take a look here in the 11 to 15 day time frame in terms of precipitation. We scroll down. You can see overall we should get into a little bit more of an active pattern. I don't disagree with that, but there's differences between really all 3 major ensemble models on where the precipitation is. The GEFS is trying to bring back this northwest flow action in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. I really think we're kind of past that time of the season, so not really in favor of that. It's also a bias of the GEFS. I do think the EPS is probably more right here with some of its precipitation trends, though I would not be shocked if in this region, just based off of some of the operational data keeping this area drier, if it's maybe a little bit too widespread with some of the moisture late in the week 2 time frame. So we try to, if we go back here to our outlooks, try to factor that in for temps and precipitation as much as we could over the next 2 weeks, but certainly will note lower confidence because of a wide variety of model outcomes as things stand right now. Which leads us into weeks 3 and 4, which will continue to be a challenge because to start the period, tropical forcing really not much of an impact. I do think with time, based off of the upper level patterns that I'm seeing, we could be feeling some kind of weak MJO phase 2 and 3 forcing. We talked about that on Tuesday. If we take a look at years that match that the best, overall it does favor a more mild pattern, but there are still some signals for seasonable to some cooler air south and east. And I think ultimately what can happen, if we take a look at the EPS weekly, note how by the second week of the month, it does build in the warmer air in a more widespread fashion and shoves it further east. I think that the start of the weeks 3 and 4 time frame can be mild as a whole, more widespread, warmer than normal temperatures. However, I think by the end of weeks 3 and 4, as we go into the 3rd week of September, the core of your warmth will have the tendency to move back west, and we're going to get more cold shots of air into the eastern half of the country. Why is that? If we take a look at the North Pacific, there is a very, very strong signal for a cooler pattern shift again for the back half of September. 14th to the 20th of the month, again into that 3rd week of September, there is certainly a cooler signal in here, especially for the eastern part of the country. And so when I mentioned earlier volatility, there's going to be ups and downs. The month is going to start cool, it's going to get warm again, then it gets cool. There are ups and downs, which will make it challenging to determine, okay, well, how does this all average out? Does the warmth win out? Does the cooler air win out? Does the warmth win out in the west, or does it win out in the east when it moves further east? It's a challenging setup. And so the emphasis I want to put here with this outlook is there's going to be volatility, there's going to be variability, there's going to be ups and downs. I don't see a locked in pattern one way or the other into the month of September. Probably some fall swings, if you will. In terms of precipitation, that makes it challenging too, because it probably means that a lot of areas cash in on moisture, but there will still be spots that are wetter than normal and drier than normal. If we look at the tropical forcing, the MJO alone would tend to favor some drier conditions kind of through this region in here most consistently, with some moisture across parts of the plains and then maybe up the southeast coast and along the Gulf Coast. If we take a look here at the negative AAM or weaker global winds with the MJO, you can kind of see that type of idea. I think that this may be a little bit too far east, but I also think you see some of the messiness here. Again, you're probably not locked into a dry pattern or a warm or a wet pattern necessarily throughout this month. There probably are some ups and downs. If you take a look at those analogs that we showed earlier, they lean more dry across the central part of the country. And so what we try to do here is blend all these ideas the best we could. If we take a look at temperatures, again, I do think that early in this period, there is the potential that the core of the warmth could be more in here. I think that's certainly plausible. But I think that as this cooler shot of air comes back late in the period, it retreats back west. And I think that there's more of a tendency to stay warmer than normal in general up here. And so this is where I favored the most above normal temperatures, but there is probably fluctuations. If there is a risk to the forecast, if that warm up lingers longer, you just shove everything east. It's warmer in the east. This cooler air, seasonable air, would try to push east more so into the western plains as well, kind of like what the EPS is trying to do late week 2. That is the risk to monitor, but I do think there are ups and downs in this forecast in general. Precipitation is even more tricky. Confidence, I would say, is about as low as it can go in terms of this weeks 3 and 4 time frame. It's well below normal right now. Again, tried to average things out the best we could between analogs throughout September, between the different pattern drivers in this period. Could week 3 be a little bit wetter in this area? I don't think that's off the table. But as that cooler and drier air comes down with the front late in the period, we probably suppress the moisture again. And so tried to mix the ideas the best that we could. In general, this is the area for September as a whole that analogs are drier, are less active. And we try to factor that in here with this forecast. Regardless, guys, because of the variability of this period, it's something that we'll need to keep an eye on and trend. There may need to be some adjustments that are made with the middle part of September, but that is the general idea as things stand right now. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of your day.